So you're struggling with confidence, huh? Maybe you clicked on this video because you really want to build your self-confidence. But let me tell you, I've got some better alternatives today. Let's talk about it. I'm Jonathan Yelland, and this is Finding the Point. Hey folks, welcome to Finding the Point. I'm Jonathan Yelland, board-certified behavior analyst. With me is Pastor Aaron Mudge from Calvary Baptist Church in Huron, South Dakota. Pastor Aaron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. Having a good day. Glad to be here to discuss this idea of confidence.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm pretty confident that it's been a busy day for me. I already had a few client issues to deal with, but it's time to stop and enjoy taking a look at God's Word and some of the ways we can apply it practically in our lives. Specifically, today's idea of self-confidence. So, Pastor Aaron, I suppose I'm not letting the cat out of the bag too much with the audience here to let everyone know you're not a big fan of self-confidence, I hear.
No, I mean, I want to be delicate, but to
I'll
be
help
honest,
you out then,
I
Pastor
find...
Aaron, I will not be delicate. Self-confidence is pride, all right? Self-confidence is a form of pride. It's not the right way to... Now, the people who are out there like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Because self-confidence is important. I've got to be confident and capable. You do. But the world's concept of self-confidence really just is another form of pride. And the Bible has a better way. So there we go. I said it for you. But
yeah, there you go. That's kind of my deal is... It's good. Confidence is great. We need to have confidence, yeah. But from a biblical, this idea of self-confidence is a worldly concept that I think is really creeping into the church, and I see a lot of people talking about, well, I need to build up my self-confidence, and I think that the much better way is to say no to self. Right? The Bible talks about denying self. And say, God is the one that I should be confident
Well,
in.
Absolutely. And I'll bring up the keynote verse for this episode, 2 Corinthians 3:5. Not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think anything as of ourselves, but our sufficiency is of God. And the idea being here, if you think that it's you that is successful and accomplished or able to do something, well, that's a pretty ignorant view, because the only way you can do anything that you can do is because God has made it so that you can do that thing. I mean, us speaking here today, I mean, I don't think we've shared with people, but, all the different ways God's provided for us to have the studio setups, the software and the microphones and everything that we've had, and all the ways God has stepped in to help us build this program. I mean, that's not because of us, really. That's something that God has put together.
No.
We're able to talk intelligently about the topics. Well, I think we're intelligent. If you don't disagree, leave us a comment. But we're able to talk intelligently about our topics because God has given us the opportunities to develop those skills and the knowledge that we've been able to learn from His Word and wise counsel and teachers that we've had.
Yeah. Yeah, and confidence and being confident in whatever area that you're doing or speaking about or is an important thing. And self-confidence is, to me, it's one of those things that it's not as good, because, as the Bible puts it, just a couple verses here, John 15:5 says, "For without me ye can do nothing," talking about Jesus being the vine and we're the branches. And Psalm 39:5, this is one that I think about a lot, says, "Behold, thou hast made my days as an handbreadth, and mine age is as nothing before thee. Verily, every man at his best state is altogether vanity." Yeah. And we think that we can do such great things, but when you compare us to Almighty God, it's nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's vanity. And so rather than me being confident in my own ability, I'm going to look to God. David talked about praising God for teaching his hands to war and his fingers to fight. And David was considered one of the greatest warriors of his time. And he attributed that to God, and his confidence was in his God and not in his own
And with
abilities.
that, Aaron, I'd like to add, because we'll see a lot of times, like somebody does something great, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it was all God," but you definitely can see the sense where they're like, "Yeah, I'm look at me, I'm so humble because I'm giving the praise to God." Like, no, this is a genuine. When you have a genuine conception of self, and the value that you have in yourself as coming from God, and the abilities that you have as a result of God's preparation for you, that is a humility and a meekness that provides power to overcome the adversity that might otherwise interfere with you. And I think that's the conception that fills the role that our society is given to self-confidence.
Right.
So, I'm sorry, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, and the reason the idea concerns me is because it is, as you said, it is pride ultimately, and it's an avenue for pride. And the reason it concerns me is because it's something that I could see easily slipping into my life, and I in all areas of my life seek to be careful to trust in God, and I have seen such a difference in my own life when I changed my thinking on that. That my confidence isn't in me and in my ability. My confidence is in God and the one that gave me that ability.
Yeah, too. And if you're really, you could put it into this context, Pastor Aaron. I think you could look at it and say, self-confidence is kind of like when the leftists relabel the name for something. So, like, it's not baby murder, it's pro-choice. Okay. Well, when you say pro-choice, people are like, well, that seems like a good thing. But in reality, it's baby murder. So, in the same way, self-confidence. Well, confidence is a good thing. People like to see someone who's confident. When you're around someone who's confident, you generally feel better. You like to be a person that's confident. Self is the idea that me personally, could be confident. That sounds really good. And in reality, self-confidence functions as a label to rewrite the meaning of the word pride in a way that seems much more palatable. So I think we have to be really careful about that, because just like the left would relabel baby murder, so too would they relabel pride as self-confidence. So I want to, that's like the TLDR for this episode, because I know not everyone watches all the way through, but
I'm not sure everyone's even going to know what TLDR is.
It's too long, didn't read. Sorry, I'm way too in internet culture. Sorry, I watch a lot of YouTube and do a lot of Facebook, because, and not because I'm suckered into it, Pastor Aaron, but because somebody's got to fight the good fight on the internet. So that's us in part. Please share our videos. But to go into things more in depth, I'd love to just take the psychological approach and the analytical approach that we're famous for here, and put self-confidence into our systematic framework. There we go, using all the terms today, because, well, this is a little bit of an aside, Pastor Aaron, but I think it's really important that we as Christians don't have a what's a good way to call it, like a buffet style of theological understanding, where we've got the Bible as a buffet, and we go up and I know what this verse is, and I know this theological concept, and I can put baptism as the Lord's Supper as the holy ordinances on my plate and eat that, no problem. And we can just pick out all these parts, and we might even pick out a significant amount of parts and learn them, but we never develop it into a consistent whole, that a system that works with itself and explains itself. Now, that exists. The Bible has that there for us, but the modern conception of theological study often falls back to, well, what are all the possible doctrines we can think of, and then what's our position on every one of those doctrines? I mean, that's even with respect to all of our teachers, I mean, that is taught as systematic theology, but it's not actually systematic. Right. There's no system of understanding. Right. It's just, here's all the doctrines, and here's the the correct Christian view on all of them. And the views they espouse are correct. Like, it's actually the right doctrine to take from Scripture, but it's not systematic. So if something comes up that's unexpected or unknown, like let's say the advent of Facebook. Let's say, oh man, I'm going to get myself in so much trouble. All right, Aaron, we're going there. Let's say the advent of COVID. And all the churches now who are being told by the government you have to shut down because COVID. And it's actually dangerous for some people. And I mean, we have people who, my friends, people we love from our church who died from COVID. So it's actually serious. It's not something we can just say no. But then also we've got the Bible saying, forsake not the assembling of yourselves together on the one hand.
Right.
But then also people are saying, well, we could just meet online. And is meeting online the same as meeting in person? And this is not like the Bible doesn't have chapter and verse on Zoom, okay? It's not in there. And if you don't have a systematic framework, you're not able to apply those concepts in a consistent, systematic way that's going to answer how we should act in those tough situations or in situations where new things come up, like the COVID challenges. Now, I know, yeah. Pastor, you had to make some tough decisions for your church, and I'm certainly not criticizing that at all. So I just want to be clear on that. But
oh yeah. Well, and you talk about the framework. I think we've talked about this in a previous video, but it's been a while. Whenever I think of framework, I think of the Bible talks about how the Word of God is our foundation, right. And of course, any good Baptist knows that that's the first
right. And
thing.
Christ
Bible
is
the sole authority of faith and practice, right? And so that's our foundation. But I think something that we don't neglect to think about is when you're building a house, it's not just, you can't just be like, okay, I have the foundation, now let's just throw everything in there. You also now need to build upon that foundation a framework from which everything is going to hold together. Absolutely. And so, like when you're building a house, you need to have a 2x4 framework of different studs and things put together so that you can put the sheetrock on the walls and so that you can put all the different things together and it all comes to, and it holds together when the wind blows. And I think sometimes, like what you're saying, is in our view of theology and Christianity, we just kind of, okay, here it all is, let's just throw it on the foundation, right, and hope we can make a sturdy pile.
Yeah, and it becomes a sturdy pile. It doesn't become a house. And
right.
So then what happens is every wind of doctrine blows up, to pull the Bible metaphor in. And that wind of doctrine challenges especially the kids. And, well, they're not kids anymore. I mean, they were kids, and then now they're young adults and teenagers. And then their faith is challenged by people who do have a systematic framework of thinking, usually a progressive leftist theology, which I don't mean like liberal Christians. I mean not anti-Christian, progressive, religious, secularist liberals. There's a bunch of isms for you all at once. But those guys do have a cohesive, like systematic way of thinking, and they can throw that at our kids. And if our kids just have a pile of doctrines that they memorized, it's not systematic and it will not hold up. And so we see those kids leave home and go to school somewhere and be confronted by these ideas they're totally unprepared to face, and then they're destroyed by it.
Which is why we're talking about self-confidence today, because that is one of those things that without a systematic framework can kind of be like, okay, well, I don't see a problem with that. And
right.
It can
because it's sneaky. It's part of that leftist mindset of, we'll just change the words to get people to accept something they wouldn't accept if you called it what it really is. So self-confidence, confidence in the self, is pride in the self. One could call it self-pride and be more accurate. So let's just really tear apart this idea of self-confidence and then talk about what we've got from God's Word instead. So self-confidence, from a behaviorist psychological conception of it, is a hypothetical construct and explanatory fiction that we use to describe an unobservable internal state. How much jargon can I get in one sentence there, Pastor Aaron?
Yeah, I think we need to define those, especially explanatory fiction.
Yeah.
I know we're not talking about a fiction book.
We are
here.
not. We are not. No. Hypothetical construct is a thing used in science. I believe it's used in several science fields beyond just behavior science. And then explanatory fiction. Well, let's go through them in order. So, hypothetical construct is a hypothesis that explains a phenomenon that you can't observe or isn't measurable. So, like the textbook definition is an explanatory variable that's not directly measurable. But basically, it's like, I know that my house is standing, so I am going to assume there's some foundation underneath it. And since the floors in my kitchen bounce up and down if I jump on them, I'm going to assume that it's not a slab and it's probably like stick-built trusses or something. I've never observed it, but that's my explanation for why I don't fall through the kitchen floor. This is a terrible explanation, but we were talking about houses, so now that's all I can think about. So yeah, a hypothetical construct. We're explaining something that we can't observe. So, the example they like to use in grad school for this is anger. So they'd say, yeah, that kid over there, he's really mad. He's really angry. Well, how do you know that kid's angry? Well, like, he's screaming at me and like trying to kick me. It's like, okay, well, how do you can't observe that he's angry. You're just observing that he's screaming and trying to kick you. You're assuming that he's doing that because he's angry. You created this hypothetical thing called anger, and then you've given that as the reason for him kicking you. Okay, now, does anger exist?
Sense.
We feel anger in ourselves. So yes, and we've talked about anger and reflex emotions before and all that. That's a whole nother thing.
Right, which is why, like, when I had training in the medical field, they were very specific. You don't say the patient was angry. You say the patient was yelling and screaming and throwing things. Because
that's objective and that's measurable. And so when you look at the objective and measurable, then you can think about it scientifically and systematically. So when we say, oh, that guy's pretty confident or self-confident or whatever, what we're really seeing is the person's engaging in this behavior that shows confidence. Okay. And we're assuming that is there because of self-confidence. But realistically, what you're seeing is, I don't know, like, what's some self-confident behaviors? Like, he's standing up straight. He's got an open body language, and he's smiling, and he's speaking calmly and clearly and slowly at a good rate. Like let's just say that, like, he's a public speaker, and that's what we're saying. Like, oh yeah, he's got pretty good self-confidence. Well, the self-confidence is a hypothetical construct. You can't actually observe that self-confidence. You're just assuming that it's something that's there. So, and I bring this point out, Aaron, to point out that we're assuming self-confidence is some other thing. I'm claiming that it's pride. I don't think it exists. I think it's pride. But for someone to argue, no, self-confidence is a real thing, that's this other thing, you can't prove that exists. You cannot prove that it's real. You can just observe the things that people do that we would label as self-confident. So I'm trying to show here how you can't necessarily claim self-confidence is anything different than actually than pride. The other concept is explanatory fiction. So the official term for this one is a statement that has the form of an explanation, but whose cause is really the same as its effect. So if we go back to and better put that one up on the screen too, Aaron, just because that's those textbook definitions don't come through as well on audio. But if we go back to the angry kid example, okay, so he's screaming and he's kicking me and all that, and like, okay, well, why is he doing that? Because he's angry. Well, how did you know he's angry? Because he's screaming. So the explanation for him kicking and hitting me is that he's kicking and hitting me because he's angry. But how do I know that he's angry? It's because he's kicking me and hitting me. So realistically, it's circular reasoning. So you're not observing angry. You're coming up with an explanatory fiction of angry to explain why he's kicking and hitting you. And then you're also saying he's kicking and hitting me because he's angry, and I know he's angry because he's kicking me and hitting me. It's circular reasoning. Is that clear?
Okay. Now, okay, so just something that occurred to me. So the hypothetical construct, let's go with the example of the angry. So now that hypothetical construct explains why that person is kicking and screaming and yelling and carrying on. So is that similar to the concept of framework then? We've come up with a framework to explain why this person is doing
absolutely.
this behavior.
Personality is a hypothetical construct. Some would also argue that personality explanations are also explanatory fictions. The Big Five personality test is currently probably the most popular explanation for personality. But even all the attributes in that are really just kind of explanatory fictions that are describing actions that we see people do. Like agreeableness, for instance. Well, they're saying, well, this person is high agreeableness as part of their personality. But in reality, what that means specifically is that that person is more likely to act in benefit towards others and to be less likely to demand their own needs are met first, and several other traits. So those are just observable behaviors. In reality, like the Big Five is just grouped different behaviors into 5 separate traits and then just labeled them as a thing. It's an explanatory fiction of a hypothetical construct. And in reality, all we can really know is what we observe and what we can see and what we can measure. And, I'm me and I'm not you, so I can only know my own mind, right? Because man looketh on the outward appearance, but God looketh on the heart. So God can observe and measure all of our internal stuff, but you can only see your own internal stuff and measure yourself.
Right. And our behavior, from a worldly perspective, well, I mean, I am who I am and my behavior is what it is. I react to whatever is around me. Whereas our perspective is we need to look at God's way and say, yeah, but what does God's way say how to do it? And that's why we wanted to approach this idea of self-confidence, because God's way is different and God's way is better. But it's true of so many different areas of behavior in our life. And so as Christians, we need to challenge some of these ideas and some of these concepts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the idea of self-confidence, it's like you would have a really hard time proving self-confidence is a real thing and is different from pride without using some kind of explanatory fiction, which is just basically circular reasoning, or without using a hypothetical construct. I mean, it's not always wrong to use a hypothetical construct. It's used in a lot of different things, but using circular reasoning to argue that we should engage in self-confidence, I don't think it's a good method. So let's take what we really mean. So if we're saying that person is self-confident, or I want to develop self-confidence, now maybe you do say, I want to become more prideful so that I'm able to just do stuff and not worry about things and worry about other people. But I don't think a Christian who's earnest about following after God and God's way is really going to want to become more prideful. So what do we really want when we say I want to be more self-confident? So I've bashed self-confidence enough. Let's build up the good part, the thing that we want to go for. You're talking about someone who's self-confident. You're usually talking about someone who's able to display outward signs of confidence. So generally speaking, we're talking about body language that exhibits a confident outward demeanor. You're talking about vocal tone. You're talking about speaking slowly. Like, honestly, Pastor Aaron, for many, many people, if you want to sound more confident, slow your speaking down. A lot of people who aren't confident talk really fast. I talk really fast sometimes, as you probably heard on this show so far. And when I find that I'm talking really fast, I either am like going into jargon and talking way over people's heads and then they just don't pay attention to me, which is terrible and dumb, or I sound nervous, and that's not good either. Right. So if you want to be confident, one of the things to do, slow your speech down, say every word with a lot of clarity, and sound like it's very important. What you're saying is an important thing. You don't have to say a lot of words to sound confident.
Yeah.
But what you're really wanting to do, if you want to develop confidence, is practice the skills that show confidence. Now, I mean, we could go into a whole. There's so many things out there on what skills show confidence that I don't think it's worth it for us to go into it right now. Feel free to find that stuff really easily elsewhere. But what you're realistically looking to do is practice the skills. It's a skill you don't have if you're not presenting yourself confidently. So practice the skills so that you can appear confident outwardly. And there's inward components too, but go ahead, Pastor Aaron, because I don't mean to cut you.
Oh, I was just thinking about some of the inward components.
Well, yeah, I think that's.
So
go ahead.
To me, one of the inward components is I think of myself, back when I was a kid, I used to like to play in the river. My grandparents had a little creek or stream in their backyard, and so I'd like to play in the river. And I'm thinking about, like walking across stones in the river there, and I put my foot on one that is, it is solid. It doesn't move at all. Well, I can be very confident that rock is going to hold me. But then I put my foot on another one that kind of shakes and moves around a little bit. And I can't be so confident in that because it might move, it might change, it might not stay where it is. And so to me, that's kind of my view of this confidence is I can find confidence in me, but the fact is I'm more like that rock that's kind of moves around and shifts because I may have great abilities in this area, but sometimes they fail. Sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes things happen, and I change.
Yeah.
And I am not always the same. And so for me, I think of that you want that solid rock then that is never going to change and never going to let you down. And if you can put your confidence in that, then you can have confidence in all areas of your life. And so for me, that is God. Proverbs 3:26 says, "For the Lord shall be thy confidence, and shall keep thy foot from being taken."
Yeah.
And if we understand and know that God is the one that we can be confident, and if I am following God's way, whatever it is that I'm doing, if I'm in his will, and I'm, for me, when I come to preach the word of God, as a pastor on a Sunday, the confidence that I have in that is not at all in me and my ability. In fact, most of my praying and thinking is about God, less of me, more of you. Let you come through because I need to be confident in you.
Pride comes if you're preaching from your pride, that's where you're fit, right? Pride cometh before a fall.
Right. And I think one of the dangers too of pride there is pride sometimes can have an overestimation of our own abilities.
Yeah.
You know what
Absolutely.
I'm saying? Sometimes I can be really proud. Oh yeah, I know what I'm doing here. When I really have no clue what I'm doing.
Yep. Sometimes I see that with my staff. I'll have new staff members who come in and maybe they were a teacher before, or maybe they had some other job with kids and like, oh yeah, I'm really good with kids. And then they come into the clinic and the clinical setting and they do not know how we do our treatments, and they start falling back on these old habits that they learned somewhere else. It's like, no, this is not how we do it. Your stuff does not work here. And what ends up needing to happen is that they have to let go of the things that they are trusting on in themselves, and they have to learn the right way to go, the right way to do the treatment in order to help the kids that we're treating. Right. So and then they do, and then they do well after that. So if any of my staff are watching, you guys are great and I love you, but everyone needs to learn.
And I just, one of the thoughts I have about this too is we can function in this life with a confidence in our own abilities. But the reason, the thing for me is that, yeah, you can, but it's so much better to put my confidence in God.
Well, in realistically, I think if you function with confidence based on your own abilities, instead of a function based in something beyond yourself, then you are like, I know I just kind of badly quoted the Bible verse about pride coming before a fall, but you set yourself up for any failure that you would encounter will totally destroy you. Okay? Because if all of your thoughts and actions and everything is built up on I'm great and I can handle all this stuff and I can do everything, trust in me, I can get me there, then when something interferes with that, like I don't know, I wanted to be a teacher in public school for a really, really long time, and I left college thinking like I'm really good at all the skills I need. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to be a great teacher. It's going to be awesome. And then I failed to even get an interview. Well, if I'm trusting in myself and my skills to be this amazing teacher, and then I'm failing to get an interview, to even interview, like I can't even get in the door to try. Well, that's going to lead to depression and anxiety and a lot of other potential issues, because you shattered the thing that you've built all of your success and trust on. You're left with, not only did I not succeed in this thing that I intended to succeed in specifically, but now every other part of my life is totally in trouble. So it's not just, oh man, it stinks that I can't get a job as a teacher that I wanted. It's I'm trusting in myself to be successful as a teacher, but also I'm trusting myself to be a successful husband, to be a successful like all the things that I want to be successful in. Now all those are in question too, because I've shattered that thing. The rock I tried to step on, to use your metaphor with the rocks, has slipped. So I have nothing with which to stand on. So now, what do I do? And then every area of your life goes from being, yeah, I'm the smartest, I'm the best, I'm the most skilled, to, okay, well, I'm totally doomed and everything is terrible and I'm the worst.
Yeah. And it can shake the entire foundation of your life.
Destroyed in is but a moment, I think, one of the Psalms. It will mess you up real fast. A lot of the kids going through those, like, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, Aaron, but the number of people who are on anxiety and depression meds right now, young people, like college age and post-college age people, it's terrifyingly bad of how many people are on those meds. Now, some people need those, so that's not the type of psychology I do, so fair enough. If you need those, you need those. I'm not telling anybody to stop taking their meds. I'm just saying that it's relying on self-confidence is not a mentally healthy practice, in my opinion, as a psychological professional. What I would say we should do instead is place our confidence in God and a firm rock that's not going to fail you. And that we even know, like, oh man, I'm going to misquote this one too. This is like misquote episode. All things work together for good to them that love God and them that are called according to his purpose. Feel free to add the reference. Yep. I can't remember it off the top of my head.
Yeah, that was pretty good though, actually.
It's something 8:28, I think.
Romans 8:28.
Yeah, okay. There we go. Thank you. I know, and this is what actually, because the teacher thing did actually happen to me. Like, I really wanted to be a teacher. I couldn't even get an interview. And part of it was the economic crash, and then also in the state of Michigan, like they basically fired thousands of teachers at once. So every job I'd ever applied for was like 500 teachers all applied, and they all had experience. And I was like, hi, I'm fresh out of school. So, it was a stacked deck in that case. But if I'd placed my confidence in myself, then I could have been shattered and just depressed and have all those things go wrong. But by placing my confidence in God instead, I can trust that, hey, this is not going the way I want it to go right now. I do not want to be in this 300, actually it was like 270 square foot apartment, like with my wife that I just married and need to take care of, and this terrible job for the electric company where I just get yelled at by people all day long and it's miserable. It was so bad. And it's like, I don't want this for me right now. This is not, I got out of school to go be a teacher, and this is what I really want. And if I had been trusting in myself, I would have been a man most miserable. But
yeah, well, without God and without an understanding of God's sovereignty and His taking care of you, you have nothing else to look to.
Absolutely.
Right? Other than
but
yourself.
With God, I can recognize, okay, this is not going the way I want it to right now. This is not good, and I don't like it. And there's nothing I can do about it. Because, back then the economy was hot garbage, and like you couldn't even get a job at McDonald's. Okay, like it was that bad back then, folks. I know that seems weird because now, like, there's literally that McDonald's on the way to work that's got 30,000 a year posted in their front window. I was like,
getting a job.
I mean, I was working this terrible job for like less than $8 an hour, and it's certainly a different culture right now. But the true answer and the true thing that helped me through that situation is that it's okay because I'm on the path that God has set up for me. And I look back, and all the different things I tried to get out of that tough situation, none of them would be anywhere near as good as the path that God did work out for me. I ended up working in a Christian school, which I never thought I'd ever do. And it was such a great experience, and I learned so much, and it grew my faith in it. And I got leadership opportunities that I definitely did not deserve. And that made me grow and put me in a position where I was able to go into the psychology field and now have a leadership role as a clinician in psychology. And just where I'm at now is so much better than any of the plans that I'd ever made for myself. And if my plans had all worked perfectly, I would have nowhere near the blessings that I have today. And His way is best. Having that confidence in God's way, that will help you through the tough times, and it will see you to a location in your life path that is so much better than if you trusted in yourself. So that, I guess I'm talking too much about myself, Pastor Aaron, but I just, it's really important to me that everyone knows, not just from the logic and reason perspective, but my own experience and my own feelings. I know personally, God's way is best. It just is.
Yeah, and that's why you and I are so zealous about this.
Yeah, it's personal to me. Like, I know I try to be very academic and clinical about things because, that is my role in our, it's the hook for the show and everything. But, I mean, it really is important. It's important to me that other people learn these things because...
Yeah, and I know this is something for me in my life and, in college and high school. I struggled with some of these things, and this is why I am so zealous about this because, I'm not naturally good at sports, and I'm not naturally good at a lot of things, and I had to work hard to get the B's, C's, A grades, and other people wouldn't do a thing, and they're A's and B's.
Yeah,
grades,
that was me on the other side of the room in college. Sorry.
Bitterness there. No, but those things could have overwhelmed me, but for me, I came to a point in my life where I began to realize I needed to not focus on what I could or couldn't do or on those things, but I needed to focus on my God and focus on the fact that I can trust Him in all things. Yeah. And God has put that to the test through the years.
It's not easy. It's not easy when you're getting...
I mean, you want to talk about a test of putting your trust in God. I think of Abraham and when God asked Abraham to offer his only son Isaac as a sacrifice.
Yeah, not easy at all. and so, I mean, having that confidence in God and that God's way is right, and that no matter how it goes down, even in the little things, you get up and you got to give that speech, and you're like, man, I wish I had better self-confidence. Well, no, you don't, for one. You wish you weren't afraid of the speech, okay? Like that's really what you want to get away from. You're trying to escape from the fear and the anxiety of the speech. And the confidence to have is that no matter how good or bad the speech goes, God will see the result to be to his glory. And if you're allied with God through salvation and dedication to his way, it's going to work out for you too. And so maybe you fail that speech. Maybe you go up there on stage and everything falls apart and they start throwing tomatoes at you and you're like, where'd they even get tomatoes? Like this isn't even like this is an indoor speech at a school. Like you can be like, even if it's that bad, I'm going to be okay because I can rely on and trust God to take care of me and to take care of that.
Yeah.
And when you have that, you can walk into anywhere and do anything you need to do. And when you know, hey, I'm doing this because it's God's way and I'm going to do right, I can walk into anywhere and do anything.
Yeah, and especially confidence, and we talked about a framework, and that's really a lot of the framework is to understand that we are made for a purpose, and our purpose is to glorify God, and we glorify God by choosing him and his way. So if I am choosing God and God's way, and I'm seeking to follow his will and to do what he has for me, there is just a confidence that comes with that. Now, you mentioned anxiety. Now, I'm assuming then you can tell us more about that.
Yeah, I would like to, if you'll allow me, I feel like I'm going a little overboard with the psych stuff in this episode. I hope it doesn't bother anybody too much.
No, go for it.
It's easy for us having the practice and experience of trusting God through our lives in ministry, Pastor Aaron, to be like, oh yeah, we got to trust God. And I have that experience having done that and having it worked, and that's something I can fall back and rely on. And I know you have had too, but to someone who's new to the scene and doesn't have that experience to fall back on, the real problem, if you're concerned about, like, if you're just like, there's different challenges people are having with this I need more self-confidence mindset. So some of them are, I'm not respected by my peers because I seem weak and I don't seem confident. So that's that external component we talked about. Solving that is just a function of practicing those self-confident behaviors, dressing well, standing in a confident manner, carrying your body language, making sure your speech sounds confident. Those are just skills to practice. And if that's your problem, literally just practice it. Get a mirror, get some friends, practice in front of them until you develop this, and it'll work. Okay, it's not that hard. Just practice that. The more challenging component is if you're one of those people who are struggling with the internal behaviors and the stuff that other people can't see. And if you're saying, I don't have a lot of self-confidence and it's not the way people see me, it's how I feel inside. What you're realistically dealing with is not a self-confidence problem. It's an anxiety problem. Now, Pastor Aaron, let me be the first to not want to be part of the overdiagnosed anxiety camp. It's very popular today to call literally any sort of internal challenge anxiety and then throw a bunch of pills at it. Once again, if you are on pills, I am not telling you to stop taking your pills. Follow the instructions of the healthcare professionals. This podcast is not medical advice. It's in the disclaimer for a reason. No. Follow your treatment, people. Don't stop taking your medicine, okay? But also, I do want to be clear that it's easy to call every little thing anxiety. So when I'm saying anxiety, Pastor Aaron, I'm not saying like you have an anxiety problem and it's like some diagnosable level of anxiety that you would get treatment for. I'm using it in the technological sense. In psychology, technological refers to like the specific terms that we use to be precise and how we talk about it. So I can go and talk to any other behavior analysts, any of the other clinicians in my center that we work with and be like, hey, this, and I'll talk in terms that like you guys probably, unless you're also in the field, like literally have no idea what I'm saying, and then that other person will know exactly precisely what I'm talking about. It's like It's like if a mechanic walks up, he's like, "Oh yeah, I got a 3/8 flange. It's gonna go into a whatever," and I'm like, "Cool, man, great, no idea." Sounds good to me, man. Well,
I mean, I need more blinker fluid?
Exactly.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I need the hydrogenated blinker fluid for the the piston shaft crank, whatever. Like, I'm like, cool, dude. So the terminology that we use in behavioral psychology is very precise. So when I'm saying anxiety, it's not a precise term necessarily in my field, but it's one that I'm defining precisely to try and reflect what how it functions. Okay, so I'm not. I just want to be clear because I don't want people to think, "Oh man, I'm feel like I don't have a lot of self-confidence. I need to go contact a psychiatrist and get anxiety medication." Okay, because I'm not saying that. That's not the right thing. So the first thing I'm going to do then, Pastor Aaron, is define what do I mean by anxiety, because I want it to be precise. So anxiety is, I'm defining anxiety as an emotional reflex that occurs when the outcomes of our actions or changes in our environment are unknown. Okay. So in that sense, it's very precise. So if you were to roll dice, okay, you don't know what the outcome of that dice roll is going to be. And there's a sense of like, oh, what's it going to be? And it can be an exciting amount of anxiety if, it's like, who's going to win the game? Like if I roll a 6 and a 3, I'm going to win the... or if I roll a 9, I'm going to land on free parking and get all that money. And then you roll your dice, Monopoly, right? So like that's a type of a level of anxiety that can be fun and is built into games of random chance. But it's that emotional reflex that's triggered by an unknown future. So sometimes it's rolling a dice and there's 6 options and you have some predictability about, well, there's 2 dice would be more than 6 options, and that's a whole probability discussion I'm not going to have right now. But sometimes it's not just 1 through 12 or 2 through 12 that I might roll on 2 dice for Monopoly. Sometimes the outcomes really are totally unknown and can change your whole life. And so that level of anxiety can be a serious problem for people. And then the way this whole thing works, if you are having enough anxiety for it to be a problem, it's usually because of one of 3 things. So you either have a total absence of any sort of history with that setting. So this would be like your high school's speech, or like your first, if you do drama in your first play. Like I was in plays in high school, so sure, it's a lot of fun. Sure. But man, those feelings before the first time you go on for your first play, ooh boy, that stage fright can be real.
Or for me, one of the ones that really gets me is my first day on a new job.
Oh yes.
That I know and nothing about.
You don't know the people, and you don't even know what the place looks like.
You're right, and you don't know how to do the things.
You haven't done your training
yet,
and you know that it really matters because you could lose this job you've worked, and then there's all your money, or you could go and everyone hates you, and then you just sit in a job you're miserable at because you ruined your first impression. So high pressure situation. You have no history with that. Really tough, right? So you can have an absence of a history. The other way that you might have a potential serious problem with anxiety would be if you have a history that includes sudden onset trauma. So this will be people who have PTSD. If you can imagine, you're sitting calmly in your living room, and then suddenly somebody drives a truck through the wall. Because you've seen videos online possibly of that happening.
Sure.
If someone who experienced that, I would be incredibly surprised if they did not have some form of PTSD from it, because you're in a setting where this thing should not occur. It's very unlikely to occur, and then it does occur. And so when you come back into a setting and you ever sit in any living room ever again, you're probably going to have this sort of feeling like at any time a truck could come through the wall and kill me.
Sort of like if someone is involved in a sudden car accident.
Yes.
There's a lot of anxiety that comes from driving again, and why
Absolutely.
they say you need to get behind the wheel right away, because otherwise it's going to build.
I'm not going to go into treatment for PTSD right now, because that would be a whole
right,
thing.
Right.
But people suffering from PTSD often have this type of anxiety, and it's related to trauma events that have sudden onset. So soldiers will run into this a lot. You hear most often PTSD in the context of veterans PTSD, because you're in a combat situation. Things happen very quickly and they're very serious, and it's very traumatic and it's sudden onset. So you could have a lack of behavioral history with the setting. You could have a behavioral history that includes sudden onset trauma. And then the last component is that you could be you could have accepted and be under the influence of faulty rules that are related to the unknown future. So that's like an over technological way of saying you could believe something that's not correct about what's going on. Okay. So if we go back to the speech, the high school speech, because everybody's had that little stage fright feeling for speech class, right? If the person is thinking everyone in this class hates me, well, most likely everyone in the class just doesn't have an opinion on you, or if they do, it's not very strong, because that's like real life. Everyone's so consumed with their own problems, they just don't care about you.
Right.
So like that's the reality of most classrooms, but in your mind you've accepted or generated this rule: everyone here hates me, and if I go up and screw up, they're going to make fun of me, and basically I'm doomed because they all hate me. So the false rule is that the people in the class hate me, and it's not accurate to the reality. So rules that are accurate to the reality, I call erroneous rules, or faulty rules, or false rules. So if you believe a false rule about what's going on, then that's a problem. So maybe you're like, I'm going into church and I'm so anxious to talk to those people in the church. I don't think anyone likes me, and they just don't see me as a good person. That's a faulty rule, unless you've done something to make everyone hate you. But I mean, in that case, I would hope that like your pastor or someone takes you aside and is like, hey man, you kind of like bothering everybody. Why don't we work on some different things to do here, so that and if you're in Pastor Aaron's church, I'm sure he would be more than happy to help anyone who's acting a little odd and being a problem there. So it's probably not an accurate rule. And so the solution to those types of anxiety all come from or all can be found in God's word. So if you are concerned about the first component, not having a behavior's history with a setting, you kind of just do some of that get good and trust God stuff. You do your best to do your best, and you trust that God is going to work it out. So your first day at work, that nervousness is there, that anxiety is there, because you don't have that history, but you're trusting that God's going to take care of you, and you go in trying to do your best and learn as much as you can. You take the feedback, you work on your skills, and you develop it. That's the solution to that, and then that anxiety goes away. And you trust, and that trust in God helps you get through that. If you're dealing with sudden onset trauma, PTSD type anxiety, that's the kind I would go see a behavior analyst or some sort of psych professional that can assist you with that. Trauma therapy is effective sometimes for some people. I would recommend you seek the appropriate professional help for your specific situation if that's the kind of trauma that's the kind of anxiety. Trauma-induced anxiety is serious, and I would say is one of those concerns that requires appropriate psychological medical attention. And then if you're under the pretense of faulty rules, it's important to take stock and reassess what you believe and what's true and not true, because we can believe things that we know not to be true. You can know that everyone in the class doesn't hate you, but you believe that they do. And stopping yourself and working to correct those false rules can make a huge difference. And the best way, in my opinion, to correct those false rules is to replace them with true rules that are accurate and that are good. And that just comes from God's word. Trust in the Lord, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, right? That one's pretty popular. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not unto thine own understanding. And all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. You put those, follow God's rules and God's way, and when you're following the rules that work. I say rules, I should probably have clarified. I mean rules in the technological sense. So which we've talked about before. So go watch the old episodes.
Right, and you mentioned that earlier here.
But
and one of the passages that really helped me in this area of confidence, I remember specifically in college coming across this, Psalm 27, 1-3. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, even mine enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Though an host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. Even if people are against me, he's saying, as they were for David, in this will I be confident. Well, what is it I'm being confident in? That the Lord is my light and my salvation.
And I think that's absolutely right, Aaron. And the true rule at the core of it that we can always fall back to is, because we have chosen to follow God and follow God's way, we can know that even if everything goes as bad as it possibly can, including suffering and our death, that by continuing to follow God and God's way, it will be the best outcome we could achieve. To summarize and wrap up here, self-confidence is pride. It just is. You can't prove to me that self-confidence exists, because it's a hypothetical construct and it's an explanatory fiction. If you're looking to demonstrate self-confidence, what you really want is to just show confident behavior, which I think every person should develop. It's an important social skill. It's worth developing. It helps us witness. It helps us make friends, and it's good for the church to have people who are very skilled in that. So I strongly advocate everyone develop confident behavior. That's something to learn and practice. That's all you need to do to get that. As far as the internal behavior, the internal challenges that you would face from a quote, lack of self-confidence, it's not a lack of self-confidence. It's the presence of anxiety. And your anxiety comes from your emotional reflexes, because either you don't have a behavioral history, or you have some trauma related to your situation, or because you believe faulty rules. The solution is to practice in that setting to build a good behavior history, seek medical attention if you have trauma, and follow God's rules and God's way to have correct thinking about the situations that you're in. That is a much stronger outcome and a much better way to live in the world. It's God's way, than having prideful self-confidence. Yeah. Prideful self-confidence will make you miserable. It will get you nothing, and it really won't work. Because the second that you're not perfect, it'll fall apart, and I don't think any of us are foolish enough to think that we're perfect enough to maintain self-confidence to that degree. So with that said, the clock is ticking away. So Pastor Aaron, is there anything you want to say before our final challenge?
Yeah, so I guess in challenge to us, a lot of what we're talking about is a challenging of our thinking. And so, for me, one of my favorite verses in this is Psalm 20, verse 7. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we will remember the name of the Lord our God. And so some people trust in themselves and in their circumstances and other things, but we make a decision to trust in God. So what I want to challenge us to do then is you examine your life. What are you putting your trust in? Am I putting my trust in me, or the things around me. Really do some self-examination, and we might find that, oh, I'm putting my trust in myself, and there's an area of pride there when I should be trusting in God. So put your trust in God.
That sounds great, Pastor Aaron. Thank you so much. So go ahead, take a moment, examine yourself. If you'd like to share that moment with us, feel free to add it in the comments. Please also give us a like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. We're working to build our outreach so we can share God's word and way with everyone. And we'd appreciate your help with that. Special thanks to Calvary Baptist Church in Huron, South Dakota for sponsoring the show. And special thanks to you for watching the show with us today. If you do have any questions, feel free to contact us, so we'd be happy to reach out and help you with any challenges you're running into. Thank you, Pastor Aaron, for joining us today as well. Get all the thank yous in here. And so as you go, remember, choose God and God's way.